We can do it. Yes, we can. We can change things throughout the land. But we all must lend a hand. We can do it. Oh, yes, we can. Oh, your neighbor over there, a bit bewildered, but he cares.
Welcome to Changing Our World. I'm Linda Weltner, your host today. We have a guest today, Peter Kent, who, you have to raise the question of what does it mean to change our world? Part of it is challenging some of the beliefs that are given to us and going to find out for yourself what is really happening and coming back with that story to tell others, and that changes our world. And that's what Peter did. Peter grew up in Marblehead, and he went to this very building for high school, and you took American history. And what did you learn about Cuba, Peter?
I learned that they were communists. It was the worst government in the world. It was an enemy of the United States.
Bad. And did you believe it at that time?
No.
You didn't even then?
No. My family was one of the 4 or 5 Democrats families in all of Marblehead. The rest of Marblehead was Republican. The teachers, there was no civil service in the 50s for school teachers. They were appointed at the whim of the school committee and the superintendent, and they had tenure, but you didn't get in if you weren't right. And if you were a Democrat, you didn't show, your face didn't show in Marblehead in the school system. So this teacher I had in high school, the junior year, taught American history. She was a Republican of the first order. She would edit what we would read in our books. And anytime a Democrat got elected over the history of the United States, we skipped those chapters. And she was very aggravated with me because I read the book from cover to cover before Thanksgiving.
Might as well tell us this lady's name.
Vera J. Thompson. She's passed away now. She retired the following year when I was a senior. And they dedicated the yearbook to her, much to my chagrin.
Okay, so many, many years later, we won't discuss how many. How did you decide to go to Cuba?
We had just gotten back from a very decadent trip to St. Lucia. We stayed at a Sandals resort. And in the accumulated mail was a brochure from a travel company that we like to use, offering a trip to Cuba, just authorized by the United States government, limited number of people. And I asked my wife if she wanted to go, and she said, why? And I said, because we can. And it's a step back into the 1950s, because I knew that they couldn't import any American cars since their revolution.
Or American medicines, or American just about anything.
Nothing from America. And they couldn't import anything to Cuba from any other country that wanted to do business with America.
Right.
I mean, the embargo was an attempt to squeeze Cuba to do America's will.
Yeah. Right, to break its will.
So my wife agreed. She was a bit reluctant, but she agreed, and so I signed right up.
You know, when Jack and I went about 15, 20 years ago, Jack went to the drug reps, and he brought about $15,000 worth of drugs that they gave him. And some friends of ours went, and they brought strings for a bass instrument.
Fiddle.
A bass fiddle, because, and most of the people who come over bring these basic supplies because they're trying to choke the life, the boycott is worldwide, and they really want to hurt them.
We had just come out of a cigar rolling factory in western Cuba, and a gentleman came running up to me and was yelling at me in Spanish, and I didn't know what he wanted. He kept pointing, and I had a pen in my shirt. And he wanted the pen, so I gave him the pen. And my co-travelers said, "Oh, that's so bad." And I said, "I liberated it from a very expensive chain in Boston. Begins with R."
Yeah, so you kind of took it anyway.
I had liberated it And so I gave it, you know, I didn't mind. But, you know, little things, the pens. I mean, one of the ladies on our trip brought a satchel full of ballpoint pens.
Right.
And they were ecstatic. They gave them out to the school children that we met and to anybody. They just loved them.
Right.
Simple things.
Because one of the things that has made it so difficult for Cubans to live in Cuba is the lack of material goods. But there's been a very positive part to that, which is they haven't been able to import pesticides, and they have a much lower cancer rate than we do. And because they can't get as many medicines as they would like, they have a very strong preventive medicine program. When you were there, you did a certain amount of things for fun, right? But did you go see anything about the medical care that Cubans
Yeah, we did. We visited a city-based medical clinic, a polyclinic or something, I think they called it, which was the center of about 53 primary care physicians. And they had another 40 or 50 physicians of specialties that worked at the clinic. And these people provided the care for about 26 city blocks in the city of Havana. And it was much like our neighborhood health centers that we have around here. Everybody had access. One of our tour members questioned the doctor giving a lecture, how about access? I mean, do they have good access to health care? And he says, what do you mean? He says, well, if I need a doctor at 2 in the morning, what do? He says, you go to his house. They live
in that area. Yeah,
they live above a little mini clinic. Their medical office, they and their family live on the 2nd floor, and their medical office is on the 1st floor. And you knock on the door and you will get service immediately. It's all free. It's all, the government provides it all.
And when I was there in the afternoon, the doctors made home visits because they lived within a neighborhood and it wasn't impossible. Do they still do that?
Yes, they do. To those people who are unable to travel to the doctors travel to them. We asked about how they're handling Alzheimer's disease and other diseases of the elders. And that's a big problem for Cuba because their population is aging. And they're having more and more of the elder illnesses and infirmities, Alzheimer's, dementia.
So what do they do?
A lot of hospice type of care, but in holistic care. And they work with the families. They provide social workers and physical and therapists and access to everything that you would like to have in this country if money were no object. It is no object in Cuba. They get what they need, and they've really dedicated themselves to providing the services to help the families. And they also provide care for when the family is exhausted. So somebody will come in and take care of the older person, respite care.
Yeah, they come to know the families. It's very person to person. It's not this impersonal at the level of the GP.
Right.
And then they refer you within these 26 blocks to the specialists, which they also have.
They have specialists in the 26 blocks, and if you need more care than that, then they send you to the 2nd tier, which is the hospitals. And if you need more care than that, they send you to the institute, which I
like
gather would be like the teaching hospitals, the tertiary care here in the United States.
And that costs nothing.
Nothing.
Right? Now, how hard is it to become a doctor in Cuba?
It can't be that difficult because they have 77,000 doctors, medical doctors as they like to refer to them, for a population of 11 million. That's a far greater percentage per capita than we have. And doctors are revered. They are a special breed, and they lend them out to other countries. It is the 3rd largest source of revenue for the Cuban government is to send their medical doctors overseas.
Because they have an excess.
They have them and most other countries don't. So they send them to Africa and South America and other 2nd world countries that are in need of medical care.
And they offered to send them to Katrina and we rejected them.
Yes.
Yeah?
One of the drawbacks for them, our local tour director's wife was an anesthesiologist. If the medical doctor goes, he or she can't take their family.
Oh,
so they go for a year or two, sort of like our armies being deployed to overseas tour duties. They get paid in accordance with the pay scale that a doctor would earn outside of Cuba.
Oh, in that country.
And the excess money, they can buy whatever they want for themselves, and they can send the rest of it back to their families. But the families, they have to go without their children and their
so that's a
partners.
hardship. But they don't have to pay for their medical education, because all education is free.
Education is free.
Through university, through PhD, through medical school, so they're not in debt. And they have to, from what I understand, make a commitment to spend either go to somewhere like in a rural area, and so that the whole country has these new doctors, or to serve a time abroad. And they go whenever there's a catastrophe or something. Cuba always sends them.
It's not like you're being sentenced to go to the eastern provinces, because they provide you with living accommodations on the second floor of your office.
Within Cuba, you can probably bring your family.
Oh yeah, you can if you're within Cuba.
Yeah.
What I think stunned most of our group was the salaries. The average salary in Cuba is about 19 American dollars.
A day?
Per month.
Oh, per month.
Per month. And of course we all go, that's so awful.
Right.
And this tour director, his wife was a medical doctor and an anesthesiologist. She makes $25 a month. Oh.
And so how do they survive on that then?
Well, they don't have to pay taxes. They don't have any school expenses. Their medical care is free, completely covered, and their housing is covered.
When I understood it, when I was there, if you lived in an apartment complex, everybody paid 10% of their income. So if you made $25 a month, you paid $250. If you worked with tourists and made more money, you paid 10% of that. Is that what you...
That's basically the way it's still going, although they've now liberalized home ownership, and they're allowing them to buy and sell property. So, but you can't use Cuban pesos. You've got to use their funky money, which is the in between foreign exchange and the pesos. They have a type of money that they call kooks, Cuban exchange money, is basically what it is. And so you exchange your euros or pounds or dollars, you get these kooks, and you can buy whatever you want in Cuba. They have government-owned stores that will only sell in kooks. Right. So that's on the very fancy streets. You can buy washing machines and dryers and televisions and whatever else that you'd like to buy, computers. But you've got to use this type of money.
One of the reasons they didn't want people to sell their apartments was, as you see now, the houses have gone. I bought a house for $42,000, I believe we did, and it's now worth more than $1 million. Well, if you're making $19 a week, you can't let that kind of bubble or inflation go up. So they didn't want them to just get more and more and more expensive as people sold them.
Cuban society has had a kind of a mixed history. When Castro arrived, he was not a communist. He was a socialist, but more he was a revolutionary. He wanted to get rid of Batista and all of the bad guys associated with him.
That we had put.
The United States had put in place.
For 100 years? How long?
Since the war of the Spanish-American War, we have been interfering with Cuba's electoral process, and whenever...
And putting in our leaders of Cuba who did what America wanted.
Right.
And Batista happened to be a criminal.
He was one of the most criminal along the line, but they never had a good one. They were always selected by the United States and propped up by the United States. And in the treaty that the United States signed in 1904, for when we took our Marines out of the country finally, gave us authority to come back anytime we needed to.
And
when
from
we
what I
needed to, not the
understood,
Cubans.
the mob was Cuba Central, and they would go there and plan assassinations and gamble, and it was really almost a criminal enterprise that
very much.
We liked.
Right. Before Castro took over, there were 53 flights a day from New York to Havana. 53 round trips a day. It was the jewel of the Caribbean for vacations and cavorting and misbehavior. And
there were casinos.
Casinos.
There were prostitutes. There was drinking. There was, I mean...
They still drink.
It was sort of like Las Vegas, right? Only Las Vegas is cleaned up now.
Yeah, not nearly as good as Las Vegas in its worst day. The corruption was rampant.
Castro took over, and he was not a communist. And what were his plans, do you think?
He wanted to do whatever Batista wanted to do. He wanted to do the opposite. He wanted to throw out the old and start from scratch.
Cuban-based focus, right?
Yes.
Not for what made the U.S. happy.
There was no, we're not trying to please the United States, and we got no allegiance anyplace else.
Okay.
Although most of Castro's support came from the United States in funding his revolution.
From the government? Or from
No, from private citizens.
Yeah.
The United States government had not yet turned on Batista. They pulled their support from Batista about an hour and a half before he abdicated and went to Portugal to die. We supported Batista virtually up to the end.
So how did Castro become communist?
He was forced into it by the United States government. Because a lot of the things he talked about wanting to do, which is educate everybody, make sure everybody was fed, healthcare, free healthcare for everybody. Oh, those sugar plantations and the sugar mills, government's going to run those now. We're taking those. That's communism, said the Eisenhower administration and the Cuban-American lobby in Miami. So we labeled him a communist long before he ever decided that his only friends in the world were in Russia.
You know, we've done the same thing with Venezuela. Venezuela is now in economic communion with the world that we don't approve of. And that's because we've driven him there. Right. And then we say, oh, look, he's hanging around with Iran. Well, that's the only company that will do business with him because all our friends have said we won't give you a penny and we won't deal with you. We've already established that education is free. Everybody can go as far as merit takes them, right? You have to take tests and stuff like that.
You have to take tests and pass them.
And housing is proportionate to your salary. Right. So that, and from what I understand, they're continually building, sort of on the model of Habitat, which is the people who are homeless help with the building to the extent that they can, and then
and the neighbors in the area that they live in. If a house burns or has a catastrophe and they have to rebuild it, the whole neighborhood helps in the building.
There's tremendous community.
Very much. It's a very artistic country. The people love to sing and dance and paint and do sculpture. So we went to two different community art centers. One was by a gentleman by the name of Fuentes, a very famous artist who's been exhibited all over the world, including the United States. And his neighbors all help him, and so they've decorated the entire neighborhood in his paintings. And a lot of his paintings are on tiles, so it's all beautifully tiled, and they have sculptures and paintings adorn all the houses, and it's a gorgeous neighborhood to drive into. You approach it, it's not far from where Castro's residence is. It's maybe 4 blocks away.
And you know what else? One of the first things Castro did was he built an art museum because he wanted the people of Cuba to take pride. And I visited it. The paintings were gorgeous.
And we went to another community art center where the neighbors talked the government into letting them have an unused water tank and lent them some equipment so they could chisel out doorways and make some windows. And they built a stage and a gallery, and they teach dance and they teach music and they paint. And we visited with these people, lovely people, just had a great time. And my wife bought a wonderful painting.
With kooks.
With kooks, yes. 50 kooks. I'm sure it would cost $1,000 in the United States. It was gorgeous. My wife is a professional shopper. She likes to shop. and her biggest worry was that she couldn't use her American Express or MasterCard in Cuba. But it wasn't necessary. The Kooks did it. We could have Kooks, and so she bought this. She wanted it, and 4 or 5 other people on the trip wanted the same painting, but she jumped, took it right off the bat. She's very pleased with it.
Were there other examples of community?
Every time we stopped in an area of Havana, the entire neighborhood came out to visit and talk with us. Yeah. We went to Hemingway, where he hung out, the bars he hung out at, his room in a hotel that he lived in for years.
On the mojitos on the penthouse layer. There's a bar where Hemingway drank. It was the best drink I ever had.
And we went to the house that he eventually bought. And every place that we went to, everybody came out. In the neighborhood, they just wanted to talk to you.
All right, now
they weren't looking for anything or any handouts, unless of course
there?
you had some pens. They would like some pens.
We have quite a bit of hunger here in the U.S. I was shocked by the statistics of how many people are hungry here. Do they have hunger in Cuba?
Only if they're on a diet. The government provides food rations, and if you make $19 a month, the rations will cover about 2/3 of the foods that you need.
They give you the basics. Everybody has milk, eggs, beans, rice, butter, whatever, so that no one has malnutrition. Right? If you can afford to buy it, you get that.
I saw no signs of malnutrition, but I understand that we were on a guided tour.
Right. Did you see many military people?
Oh, virtually none. Well, I saw 1 truckload of soldiers going to or from a base, but no guns. I mean, they were just a truck carrying soldiers.
How about police?
Police walk beats. They, alone or in pairs. They didn't carry guns, most of them. They had billy clubs and walkie-talkies.
How about your guides? Were they afraid to talk to you about
Oh, no, very open. They're very, very open, not afraid to criticize the Cuban government for what they felt were foibles. I asked about where the beaches went that were used to front the Havana, the city of Havana, and they said, that was government error, poor planning. They built in the wrong place, they didn't pay attention to the tides and the currents, and so we have no beach anymore. Any other government errors? Oh yeah, they make lots of errors, but they're not afraid to say oops and go back to where they were and try another attack on whatever problem they want to solve. And the people seem to, everybody we ran into, are not afraid to talk about what's right and what's wrong with their government. They're quite happy with it. Yeah. They are not foaming at the mouth to revolt.
Right. And as far as I know, the thing that they mostly mind is the lack of material goods, which is not the fault of Castro or his brother, but the fault of the U.S. You know why I think we're doing it? Because we don't want a country that is poorer than us to prove that you can still give every person in your country medical care and education, housing and food.
We had a lecture from a former UN ambassador from Cuba, and he talked about the history of the relations of Cuba and America. And back when John Adams was Secretary of State, he described Cuba as a ripe fruit waiting to be picked by the Americans. And that goes back to the early 1800s. We have always had it's ours, what they're resisting. It should be part of the United States. It should be like Puerto Rico. But they're quite happy with the way they are, and they do not want to be part of the United States. Right. They just don't want to be left in an indigent state by our government.
And you know, their statistics are better than ours. Did you get any of that? They have less infant mortality, they have less cancer.
Well, almost all the civilized world has better records on health care and infant mortality.
Not doing
I'm not sure that it's just Cuba. we had a very backward way of delivering health care in this country.
And you know, this idea that you should take care of your people, I know that they do a survey of homes that have extra bedrooms, and when a hurricane is coming, they will send out these huge camels. Did you see those camels?
Yes, I did.
They're double buses and everything. And take people from the part of the island where the hurricane's going to hit and move them instead of leaving them as we did, you know, individuals in Katrina. Sink or swim on your own, either get out of here or if you can't get out, drown.
Well, you could be in New York City and have a mayor that doesn't think it was going to be that big a deal.
But they have almost no deaths. I mean, they get hit by hurricanes all the time, but the country has a nurturing attitude toward its people.
They look after each other, and the government looks after them, not in a overseeing, but
surveillance way, like
no,
right.
They just provide everything that you need to live on.
Well, very interesting to go and see for yourself, isn't it? And not
It was just to see something different.
I went to Venezuela. I found out everything that I read about in the American press was not true.
Oh yeah, well, there's nothing true about Cuba that you read in the American press. It's horrible. I mean, you could get The Nation and find out a few other
right, if you read,
relevant
right,
facts.
a few left-wing things, right. And your wife?
She survived not shopping. She was able to buy a beautiful painting.
You know what I brought home? I brought home jewelry made out of all the silver that the wealthy people left behind.
Yes.
And they didn't have silver, so they used these silver, and this is based upon part of a knife, a silver handle of a knife.
We had a woman on the tour that had a bracelet made out of a fork.
Yeah.
And gorgeous, a beautiful piece of work.
Yeah, yeah. Peter, thanks a lot. So nice to have you.
Well, thank you, Linda, for asking me. It was a wonderful trip. I'm so glad that I went.
Thank you very much for visiting us. Why don't you pick a place in the world and go see what it's really like. Thanks for visiting.
'Cause an idea, whose time has come, cannot be stopped by anyone. Plant your seeds in fertile ground. There ain't nothing gonna keep it down. Oh, we can do it. Yes, we can. We can change things throughout the land. But we all must lend a hand. We can do it. Oh, yes, we can. We can do it.